Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. According to the General Hospital recap for Tuesday, June 3rd, Professor Henry Hank Dalton became eerie with his poolside staring at Emma Scorpio Drake, and Jason Morgan was barred from the courtroom. This is how the thrilling GH episode from Tuesday unfolded. Kai Taylor and Trina Robinson ran into Emma beside the Metro Court pool, and Emma wasn't pleased when Jocelyn Jacks also appeared. Jocelyn approached Professor Dalton after spotting him, and Emma told Trina and Kai that Joss had stolen her research assistant position. Jocelyn wouldn't have accepted a job that she didn't deserve, Trina contended. Jordan Ashford was brought to Professor Dalton's table nearby by Jen Sidwell, who then highlighted his revolutionary study that will alter the course of history. Professor Dalton welcomed Jocelyn to join them after she showed up with some research-related updates and introduced herself as his new assistant. When Jocelyn sat down with Jordan, Sidwell, and Dalton, they discussed the professor's extensive screening procedure. Having been burnt once before, Professor Dalton needed to know he could trust his employees. Jocelyn moved aside to answer a phone call after Professor Dalton discussed creating a new route to renewable energy. After Sidwell left, Jordan spoke with Professor Dalton alone, but he became sidetracked by Emma's bikini. Dante Falconeri expressed regret for his treatment of Sunny when he first learned that they were father and son at Sunny Corinthos' home. Despite Lois Cerullo's deceit, Sunny still saw her as a friend and focused on Giovanni Gio Palmieri. Gio was not present when Lois, Gloria Cerullo, and Brooke Lynn Quartermain visited the Quartermain residence. Gio simply wanted to gather his belongings and head off, but Lois spoke up in support of Brooke Lynn. Brooke Lynn was disappointed that she didn't want Gio, even though he didn't know he was her son. As a fearful teenager, Brooke Lynn claimed she couldn't care for Gio, but that wasn't the same thing. Gloria reminded Gio of his love for his adopted mother, Camilla Palmieri, and that he should be thankful that they were able to find him a suitable home. Gio said that he did, but the lie still infuriated him. Brooke Lynn asked whether Lois and Gloria forced a dying woman to be silent, because Camilla even lied on her deathbed. But Lois and Gloria made it plain that Camilla was the one who made the choice. Brooke Lynn raged about Gloria and Lois not telling her about Gio after Camilla died, even though she too chose to give up her baby child. When Brooke Lynn had had enough of Gloria and Lois, she told them to leave. Brooke Lynn yelled that she would have her possessions sent to Bensonhurst even though Lois had intended to pack them up. After Lois and Gloria left, Gio said that Brooke Lynn had been duped into liking him. However, because he hadn't been wanted, Gio rejected his family and refused to stay at the Q home. Alexis Davis played down any suspicions of money laundering at the law office, acting as though she was secure in all of her assets, but Marco Rios was available to assist her if she ever needed it. Rick Lansing called Alexis and instructed her to come to the courthouse after noticing that Diane Miller was phoning Christina Corinthos Davis as a witness. By using his power, Rick persuaded Alexis to come get Christina and prevent her from testifying. After following instructions, Alexis finally took Christina back to the legal office, where she met Marco. Since Jason's testimony would harm Michael's case, Diane forbade him from testifying or even from entering the courtroom. Diane didn't want to let Rick concentrate on the incendiary device and all of Sunny's threats. Soon after, Jason and Sunny talked about all the most recent court developments. Later, as Brooke Lynn was sending her and Gloria back to Bensonhurst, Lois arrived to bid Sunny go. Diane informed Judge Eva Heron in court that Michael was requesting sole custody and making Willow Corinthos an offer of $5 million as a settlement for their divorce. Rick made it plain that Willow couldn't be persuaded to change her mind about wanting children. Carly Spencer testified on the nursery footage and Willow's subsequent attempt to run away with the children. Willow transporting the children over state lines for Drew's inauguration without Michael's consent was a topic of discussion. Harrison Chase also took the stand and was questioned about Willow's past adultery, but Rick quickly pointed out that Willow had cheated on him with Michael. Regarding Dante, Rick forced him to talk about Michael's prior criminal history and injuries from incendiary devices. Diane made every effort to minimize Michael's time in prison because he attempted to save Jocelyn when she was a baby. While on the witness stand, Tracy Quartermain discussed the kidnapping scandal she had been implicated in and made the case that Drew had always desired everything Michael had, including his wife Willow. Drew Kane expressed displeasure with Rick's handling of the case during a break, but Rick countered that Diane was merely restating what they already knew. Rick alluded to having fresh information, and judging by Nina Reeves' remorseful expressions about Sasha Corbin, it appeared that she had told Rick that Michael was her baby daddy. Following Jocelyn's testimony, Rick continued to press for a response from her while questioning her about the court order. Carly hoped Joss wouldn't fall for it, but Rick emphasized that Willow was fighting for her kids, just like any other mother would. Stay tuned for more custody turmoil, according to General Hospital spoilers. I'm not sure where else is the place to be at the moment if Port Charles isn't. You're in luck if you miss General Hospital today, Monday, June 2, 2025, as a recap is provided below. After just a few hours back in town, Michael Corinthos is already making significant progress. In order to meet up with her brother, Christina Corinthos dropped by. Michael's custody dispute with Willow Corinthos was the primary subject of conversation. When Christina urges that her brother not be too forgiving to his ex, Michael responds that he doesn't intend to do so. He now realizes that Willow made the decision to ruin their family, and that their children are not emotionally secure in her care. According to Michael, this predicament is the result of both he and Willow keeping their darker parts hidden from one another. After calming Laura, Alexis responds to Marco. Laura Collins brought inquiries concerning Ace's inheritance to Alexis Davis's office. She didn't understand why $10 million would be missing from his account, even though she gets monthly statements. With quick thinking, Alexis informs Laura that she has chosen to transfer funds to a Dolos fund in order to diversify Ace's portfolio. Laura compliments Alexis for her diligence and expresses surprise that she is doing more than just watching over the account. Marco Rios shows in with inquiries regarding the file shortly after Laura departs. Rocco finds out that Gio is his brother. He cautions Alexis that the Dolos fund has only been in existence for a month and appears to be being used for money laundering. Viral footage from the nurses' ball has gone viral online, and Rocco Falconeri is curious about Gio Palmieri's true story. As he enters the room, he asks Lulu Spencer if Dante Falconeri is indeed Joe's father. Telling Rocco that he and Gio are brothers, Dante gives him the information he knows. Lulu acknowledges that Gio overheard her talk with Lois Cerullo and discovered the truth. Rocco seemed to understand the seriousness of that more than she does. Dante acknowledges that he is still figuring things out, and will update him on developments as they become clear. Lucky is at last sincere with Liz. Lucky Spencer eventually made the decision to tell Elizabeth Baldwin the truth after weeks of keeping it a secret. He informs her that Christina cut the brakes, which is what caused the vehicle accident she was in with Rick Lansing. He reveals that when Christina did it, she believed it to be Ava Jerome's automobile, and was appalled to learn that it was actually Rick's. According to Lucky, he thought Christina was truly guilty after seeing her that evening, and that she would never do something similar again. He would now be seen as an accessory if he went to the police because he didn't come forward right away. Liz decides to remain silent as well after considering the ripple effect of all the people that would be impacted if she went to the police. Lucky explains to Liz that he told her this in order to gain her trust. Liz notices a black ring box where Lucky had been seated after he has gone to the kitchen. Gio has inquiries about Sonny. Gio is back in Port Charles, and he is going to Sonny Corinthos first. When he asks him questions, Sonny responds that he will do his best to respond. Sonny informs Gio that he has taken care of him since he is unique, and that he was unaware of their relationship. He reminds Gio that he couldn't have known the secret from the start, because he didn't find out Dante was his son until roughly 10 years ago. Sonny acknowledges that Dante is an excellent father, but he tells Gio that it took him years to become closer to him. Sonny advises Gio to wait as he maintains that Dante doesn't like him at all. Sonny provides Gio a place to stay, and assures him that he will always be there for him. Gio informs him that he must go it alone because he is unsure about his next course. Dante arrives in search of guidance after Gio departs. Lois and Gloria face off against Brooke Lynn. Gloria enters in a rage as Brooke Lynn Quartermain and Lois are in the QS kitchen gossiping about Gio. Before reprimanding Brooke Lynn for upsetting her mother, she rants at her and tells her that Lois deserves respect. BLQ loses it all when the two maintain that hiding Gio in plain sight was the proper thing to do. Gio was just 12 when his adoptive mother passed away, and Brooke Lynn was an adult by then and might have taken over. Rather, everyone remained silent, allowing her to console her kid. BLQ claims that she will never forgive them for the falsehoods, but Gloria feels that she should express gratitude to them for finding Gio a place to live. She claims that although she was aware as a child that she shouldn't be near the Quartermains, she never anticipated that her own family would turn on her. Gio enters the kitchen as she is saying this because she can't bear to think of him having nowhere to go and no one to trust. Tuesday, June 3, General Hospital spoilers and updates hint to impending pressure, awkward charges, and heartfelt apologies. Dante Falconeri issues a heartfelt apology, Alexis Davis sidesteps awkward charges, and Brooke Lynn Quartermain Chase puts pressure on her mother and grandmother. There is pressure. Alongside her mother, Lois Cerullo, and grandmother, Gloria Cerullo, Brooke Lynn finds herself in the Quartermain home. Gio Palmieri may still be there as well because he joined in on their contentious conversation. Brooke Lynn asks her grandmother and mother incredulously, would they really pressure a dying woman to keep their secret? She must be referring to Joe's adoptive mother, Camila Palmieri, and the infant boy, now known as Gio, who was placed for adoption after being hidden in plain sight. At least Gio knows that he was needed because it appears that he overheard Brooke Lynn complaining about Lois and Gloria not telling her this. Closing a deal or making a pitch. In another scene, Jordan Ashford and Jen Sidwell appear to be pitching someone on what Jen's business has to offer. Is she congratulating them? Or is Jordan trying to convince the person they are speaking to? It's hard to determine if she's closing a sale or making a pitch. However, GH spoilers suggest that Jordan learns more about Professor Henry Dalton, so it's conceivable they are talking to him. You are on the verge of changing the world, she assures him, and Sidwell seems quite pleased. Discomfortable charges. Alexis is being asked unpleasant questions by Marco Rios, Sidwell's son, regarding the investments that Ace Cassidy's estate is giving her. Laura Collins questioned Alexis about the disappearance of many $1 million from the estate, but she managed to avoid conflict with her. After receiving the pertinent documents from her assistant, Alexis used the shell firm that Rick Lansing had set up to handle such questions. Marco, who is currently looking into the Domos company, claims that it seems to be a shell corporation set up to hide financial problems. Are you saying that I'm laundering money? Alexis answers, I'm so sorry. He greeted Dante at Sonny Corinthos' house and said he had just missed Gio. Dante began the argument by informing his father that he owed him an apology, to which he replied that he had missed 22 years of Gio. At least he didn't shoot Gio the way Sonny did to Dante, even though Dante had been upset to learn that Sonny was his father. Longtime fans will remember that Olivia Quartermain exclaimed, Sonny, you just shot your own son, when he shot Dante as she was reportedly pursuing their son. Gio was told the narrative by Sonny, but he left out the part about shooting Dante. Now that he knows he has a secret son, Dante is obviously apologizing for their own dysfunction. Extraordinary actions. Jason Morgan and Carly Spencer are evidently in the courthouse getting ready for Michael Corinthos' child custody hearing to begin. Jason is wearing a suit, maybe for the first time since he and Carly got married for a short time and Sonny entered the room after returning from Nixon Falls. Carly is stating that she would prefer to keep her grandkids, Amelia and Wiley Corinthos, apart from Drew Kane and Willow Corinthos. She assures Jason that she will take all necessary precautions to shield her grandchildren from that setting. Carly takes this seriously and will do whatever it takes, even if it involves disclosing things she is aware of. Someone is called to the courthouse by Rick. Rick is on the phone at the courthouse, perhaps contacting a last-minute special witness for the hearing on Michael and Willow's divorce and child custody. He says to someone in a tone that implies they should drop whatever they are doing, to go to the courthouse right away. He will also put pressure on Alexis, according to other GH spoilers for this episode. Could he possibly save her from having to explain the Domos company to Marco before he outwits her? Or might he be reaching out to someone else, maybe to make some startling disclosures of his own in court? An important and controversial turning point in the ongoing legal battle over Jason's child's care was his absence from the custody trial. After a string of incidents that the court judged to be disruptive, improper, or otherwise detrimental to the case's integrity, the decision to prohibit him from the proceedings was not reached hastily. After concluding that Jason's presence would interfere with the court's capacity to hold a fair and unbiased hearing, the presiding judge decided that he would not be allowed to attend any more sessions pertaining to custody arrangements. Questions surrounding parental rights, due process, and the extent to which a court can deny a parent access to legal proceedings involving their own kid were all raised by this judgment, which shocked all involved. Jason's expulsion from the courtroom stems from several alleged incidents of misconduct at earlier sessions. He had frequently disrupted proceedings, yelled at the judge, opposing counsel, and even his ex-partner, and had violent body language that caused discomfort to others in the courtroom, according to witnesses and court authorities. Bailiffs had to step in to stop an escalation on at least one occasion because Jason's actions were viewed as dangerous. His behavior continued to deteriorate in spite of the judge's admonition to maintain composure and follow courtroom protocol, and it was ultimately decided that he could no longer attend in person. Given the high stakes involved in custody disputes, his legal team contended that his emotional responses were reasonable. Nonetheless, the court insisted that there were boundaries to what could be accepted before jeopardizing the proceedings. This choice had far-reaching consequences. Jason was unable to personally engage in the legal arguments that would determine his future relationship with his child or hear testimony firsthand, because he was prohibited from entering the courtroom. Instead, he would have to rely only on his lawyer to protect his interests. Since he was no longer able to watch the evidence being used against him or react in real time, this raised questions about whether his right to a fair hearing was being violated. While some legal experts argued that courts have considerable power to maintain order, others argued that parents have a fundamental right to be present during proceedings that determine their parenting rights, sparking a dispute about whether such an exclusion was warranted. Since the judge's ruling did not originally make clear whether Jason would still be permitted to submit written remarks or testify remotely, the situation grew even more confusing. In the meantime, the court's first priority continued to be the child at the heart of the case. The judge underlined that the purpose of removing Jason from the courtroom was to reduce trauma and make sure that the procedures could continue without any more interruptions. Family law advocates and child psychologists offered their opinions. Some backed the court's position that a heated debate could be harmful to all parties, especially the child, while others were concerned that excluding a parent completely could lead to an unfair outcome in the case's decision-making process. The guardian ad litem, who was appointed by the court to act in the child's best interests, reportedly expressed satisfaction at the decision, claiming that prior hearings had been too emotionally charged to allow for a rational assessment of custody arrangements. Jason's legal team started looking at ways to appeal the decision right away, including motions for reconsideration and appeals. They contended that his removal was an infringement on his right to due process, and that before taking such a drastic move, more stringent behavioral warnings or supervised attendance should have been tried. Friends and family members who supported Jason staged demonstrations outside the courthouse with signs that read, "Parents have rights and fair hearing for Jason." The case received more media attention, with some outlets characterizing Jason as a victim of an overreaching legal system, and others as a volatile person whose actions warranted the court's response. Systemic problems with family court proceedings were discussed in the larger discussion this case prompted. The family court system's detractors said that custody disputes are frequently emotional affairs and that, although decorum is crucial, judges should use caution before totally excluding a parent from taking part in their own case. In order to help parents deal with the stress of custody disputes without acting in ways that could result in their exclusion, several activists asked for improved resources, such as counseling or mediation programs. Others proposed that video conferencing as a means of distant involvement would be a workable solution, enabling parents to see events without physically being there in a way that could inflame emotions. As the case progressed, the presiding judge made it apparent that if Jason showed a dedication to following the procedures of the courtroom, the decision might be reviewed. But in order to do so, he would need to make a formal request and perhaps be evaluated to see if he could continue to participate without any further interruptions. The custody hearings continued without him for the time being, while his lawyer made every effort to make his case. Although the custody arrangement's conclusion was still up in the air, one thing was certain. Jason's removal from the courtroom had established a precedent that would affect not only his case but also future handling of cases of a similar nature. Discussions concerning the psychological effects of custody disputes on parents were also sparked by the circumstance. Supporters of Jason contended that although his actions were improper, they were a sign of the extreme stress and emotional anguish that frequently accompany such situations. Mental health experts stress that rather than merely punishing people who find it difficult to remain composed, the system should take into consideration the fact that family courts regularly deal with people who are functioning under great stress, sadness, or rage. Some suggested making counseling or anger management classes mandatory for parents in acrimonious custody battles, providing them with resources to handle their feelings in a more healthy way. Legal experts and court employees, on the other hand, supported the judge's ruling, pointing out that for courtroom operations to be successful, a certain degree of order must be maintained. They emphasized that it is the duty of judges to protect the health and safety of all those in attendance, including witnesses, lawyers, and other parties. They contended that permitting unrestrained disruptions could create a risky precedent and erode the judiciary's power. There is a fine line between upholding order and protecting individual rights, and in this instance, the court decided that Jason's actions went too far, and that he had to be removed. In the weeks that followed, discussions over judicial discretion and parental rights centered on Jason's case. It served as a model for advocacy groups on both sides of the dispute to advocate for changes, whether they were more robust safeguards against interruptions in family court procedures or more protections for parents who were excluded from courtrooms. In certain jurisdictions, lawmakers even started debating possible modifications to family court statutes to give more precise instructions on when and how a parent can be prohibited from attending sessions. In the end, Jason's exile from the custody courtroom brought to light the difficulties and emotional instability that come with family law proceedings. The court's first responsibility is to act in the child's best interests, but in order to guarantee justice, the rights of the parents must also be carefully taken into account. The larger legal community kept a careful eye on Jason's legal battle, because they knew the decision may have a long-term impact on how situations like this are handled in the future. This case highlighted the need for a sophisticated strategy that takes into account the significant stakes involved in custody battles, but the conflict between preserving order and respecting due process has not been resolved. The tale of Jason's exclusion from the courtroom is a call to action for people who want to change the family court system, a lesson for parents involved in custody disputes, and a point of reflection for legal professionals. The ruling has undoubtedly spurred a vital discussion about how courts may fairly and effectively manage the highly emotional arena of child custody disputes, regardless of whether it is seen as an overreach that violates parental rights or as a necessary move to preserve judicial integrity. When she eventually responded, "It was a long time ago," her voice was hardly audible above a whisper. Rick shook his head and scoffed. "Sasha, that's not a response. Anything might mean a long time ago. A month? A year? Prior to our meeting? After?" The acerbic tone of his voice made her wince. He was not going to overlook this. And why ought he to? She would demand, no, she would want the same transparency if their situations were reversed. With a bitter taste on her tongue, she confessed, "It was after." The ensuing hush was deafening. Rick's shoulders tensed as he looked away and ran a hand through his hair. She could see his back muscles tensing up as he exhaled in a deliberate manner. She knew him well enough to see the storm that was building beneath the surface, even if he was attempting to keep himself together. Finally, in a dangerously calm voice, he murmured, "I see." Sasha got to her feet, shaky. It meant nothing, Rick." His eyes were flaming as he spun around. "So why do it? Why would you betray me in that way if it meant nothing?" She didn't have a positive response. Naturally, there were justifications: bewilderment, loneliness, and the destructive force of ingrained behaviors. However, none of these would improve the situation. They wouldn't reverse what had been done. Her voice broke as she said, "I was stupid. I immediately felt regret for it." Rick gave a sour laugh. Remorse always comes after the fact, which is funny. He took a step back, avoiding her contact as though it were burning, but she grabbed for him. It seemed impossible to bridge the gap between them, one that was made wider by her own decisions. Even to her own ears, her murmured words, "I love you," sounded hollow. Rick's face grew serious. "Sasha, love doesn't do this. Love is honest and truthful. She wanted to argue with him, to explain that people made errors and that love was messy and imperfect. However, she choked on the words. Because she knew in her heart that he was correct. Love was meant to be based on trust, and the ability to choose one another despite difficulties. She hadn't passed that test either. Now what? She dreaded the response as she asked. Rick let out a breath, his shoulders slumping as though the entire world had fallen upon them. I'm not sure. And the uncertainty was the toughest part. They were unsure if this marked the conclusion of their already difficult journey, or merely another upsetting chapter. With unshed tears clouding her vision, Sasha collapsed back onto the couch. Now that she had gotten them to this point of broken trust, she had to deal with the fallout. Rick approached the door and stopped, his hand resting on the handle. Without turning around, he stated, I need time. Then he disappeared, leaving her to face the devastation of her decisions by herself. The impact of Sasha's disclosure and the emotional intensity of Rick's question are both depicted in this sequence. I can go into further detail if you'd like, maybe going into flashbacks of Sasha and Michael's relationship, looking at Rick's point of view, or analyzing how other characters could respond to this disclosure. Tell me how you want to proceed. The next few days were stressful. After their chat, Michael had thought that everything would instantly get back on track, but he soon discovered that restoring trust took time. He couldn't blame Sasha because she was being careful and trying things out. Since he had previously betrayed her trust, now everything he said and did was scrutinized. He deliberately tried to be consistent. He called if he said he would. He arrived early if he had promised to be somewhere. Little things, but they had an impact. He recalled her favorite coffee order, the song that always made her happy no matter how horrible her day had been, and the fact that she always neglected to charge her phone. When she came over one evening, he played it, and he knew he was on the correct track because of the way her lips moved upward. However, it went beyond lavish displays and kind reminders. They also needed to discuss the difficult topics. Sasha eventually asked the question that had been lingering between them one evening when they were eating takeout. What actually caused you to leave? Michael put down his fork and paused to collect his thoughts. Innumerable times he had asked himself the same question. He acknowledged, I think I was afraid of how much I needed you. I've always had the ability to manage things alone. Suddenly, I didn't want to after you entered the picture. I was afraid about that. Sasha examined him closely, looking into his face. So before I could do it first, you shoved me away. Slowly he nodded. Indeed. Basically. She was silent for a while before continuing. You do realize that I wouldn't have? I had no intention of leaving. The guilt was like a kick to the stomach. I now understand that. However, I let my personal insecurities to ruin everything back then. Her fingers brushed his as she reached across the table. Michael, we both committed mistakes. Additionally, I wasn't very good at communicating. Lacing his fingers with hers, he turned his hand. What does that leave us with then? Sasha gave a small smile. I believe it gives us another chance. But let's go slowly, shall we? Don't rush. Michael gave her hand a light squeeze. Slow sounds ideal. They settled into a groove as the weeks stretched into months. Arguments and periods of uncertainty persisted, but they were now addressed differently. Michael did not shut down. He remained. Sasha asked questions rather than assuming the worst. They got to know one another in a manner they hadn't before, including the messy, complex elements as well as the simple ones. Sasha rested her head on his shoulder one evening when they were sitting on the couch. Do you recall the moment you believed this would never succeed?